On a brisk autumn evening in downtown Chicago, the upscale restaurant The Sterling Oak buzzed with anticipation as patrons arrived in search of an unforgettable dining experience. With its gleaming marble countertops, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and tastefully framed artworks adorning the walls, the interior exuded an air of understated opulence and timeless elegance. Soft ambient music and the delicate clink of fine china blended with the warm glow of subdued lighting, creating an inviting atmosphere where every detail spoke of meticulous craftsmanship and care. That evening, as the door opened and a sharply dressed young man stepped inside, his presence went almost unnoticed by the busy staff. Dressed in a well-tailored navy suit, his hair neatly combed and his confident stride hinting at a quiet authority, Brandon Trump, though to the uninitiated he appeared to be just another well-dressed guest, quietly chose a table by the expansive window. His refined appearance and unassuming demeanor could have easily been overlooked by a busy restaurant, yet those observant few might have sensed that there was more to him than met the eye. Unbeknownst to the restaurant staff, Brandon was not merely a visitor, he was, in fact, the owner of the Sterling Oak. Preferring to remain incognito, he often mingled among his clientele, watching over the establishment he had painstakingly built from the ground up. However, fate had a way of intervening. On this particular evening, the stage was set for an incident that would soon reverberate far beyond the polished floors of the restaurant. At that moment Jason, a young waiter who had just completed a shift at the bar, was hurrying through the dining room. Overwhelmed by a busy evening and a mounting list of orders, he was visibly agitated. His eyes landed on Brandon, who, in Jason's impression, seemed to display a casual disregard for the high standards of dress expected in such an elite venue. Without pausing to consider any underlying circumstances, Jason strode confidently over to Brandon's table, his tone laced with irritation as if he were addressing an unruly customer. "Excuse me, sir," Jason began, his voice flat and unyielding. "Do you really think it's acceptable to expect top-notch service when your attire does not meet the standards we uphold here?" The words burst forth abruptly, hanging heavily in the charged air of the dining room. The tone was not merely a comment on fashion, it was a pointed rebuke, delivered without hesitation, as if the mere sight of Brandon's casual style justified such a scathing remark. In that frozen moment, the clatter of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversation ceased as nearby diners exchanged startled glances. Brandon's face registered shock and a flicker of hurt disbelief. He had not anticipated being publicly chastised in a venue renowned for its exemplary service. Although he was accustomed to receiving criticism in the boardrooms and business meetings that defined his everyday life, to be spoken to so bluntly by a young waiter in a public setting was both embarrassing and inexplicable. Struggling to maintain his composure, Brandon responded in a measured tone. "I appreciate your concern," he said calmly, "but I chose my outfit today based on my own sense of style. I came here to enjoy a peaceful meal, not to be admonished for my personal tastes." Yet Jason, already entrenched in his conviction that he was simply enforcing the restaurant's decorum, pressed on. "I understand that you might feel comfortable, but here we have strict guidelines. I urge you to consider aligning yourself with the standards that our patrons expect," he insisted, his words growing more curt and his glare more piercing. The remark rippled through the room, turning an ordinary dinner into a spectacle. Conversations hushed, and every eye in the restaurant focused on the unfolding confrontation. The tension was palpable, each whisper and exchanged look underscored the collective discomfort. For Brandon, the unexpected humiliation stung sharply, and as he sat in silent disbelief, a mix of indignation and resolve began to surface. He was not about to let an impulsive, ill-judged comment go unanswered, even if it meant disrupting what was meant to be a quiet evening. In that fateful moment, every detail of the encounter, the brusque tone, the condescending delivery, the cold dismissal, became the catalyst for a series of events that would soon unmask a deeper truth about the man behind the facade. Though the restaurant had prided itself on its refined atmosphere, the incident was a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of sophistication, even the most well-oiled establishments were vulnerable to human error and impulsive actions. And so began a night that would irrevocably alter the lives of those involved, setting in motion a chain of events that no one in that elegant dining room could have foreseen. In the moments following the initial outburst, the atmosphere inside the Sterling Oak shifted dramatically. The once warm and inviting dining room was now steeped in a heavy silence that spoke louder than any words. Diners exchanged uneasy glances, their hushed whispers and furtive looks betraying the undercurrent of disquiet that had suddenly taken hold. What began as a single, harsh remark was rapidly spiraling into a full-blown incident that threatened the restaurant's reputation for impeccable service. At the bar, where polished mahogany met gleaming glass, a small group of employees huddled together, discussing the unfolding drama. Among them was Marcus, the seasoned floor manager whose decades of experience in the hospitality industry had taught him to recognize the early signs of a brewing storm. His keen eyes observed every detail, the flustered gestures of the staff, the shifting moods of the patrons, and the way Jason's posture betrayed his growing discomfort. Marcus knew that a single misstep could lead to far-reaching consequences, and he mentally prepared himself to intervene if the situation deteriorated further. Meanwhile, Brandon, the man who had been so brazenly singled out, sat silently at his table by the window. His initial shock had given way to a deepening sense of frustration and confusion. As he sipped his drink, he mulled over the incident, trying to piece together how such an unwarranted attack on his character could have occurred. Every detail, the tone, the words, even the body language of the young waiter, was replayed in his mind. Although he had long been accustomed to navigating the challenges of high-stakes business negotiations, this public humiliation was something entirely different, and it left him wondering whether the restaurant could still live up to its storied reputation. Unaware of the weight of his own mistake, Jason continued his rounds throughout the dining area, moving from table to table as if trying to erase the memory of his earlier harsh words. However, every new order he took was accompanied by furtive glances and murmurs from guests who couldn't help but comment on the incident. In the midst of this growing scrutiny, Jason's confidence began to falter. His earlier certainty in enforcing the dress code was now clouded by doubt. Was he truly justified in his remarks, or had he overstepped the boundaries of common courtesy? Back at the bar, the conversation among the staff grew more animated. A longtime server, Linda, voiced her concern. "This isn't just about a dress code, is it? Something about the way he spoke. It was personal." Another colleague, Anthony, chimed in with a mix of frustration and sympathy for the agitated waiter, suggesting that perhaps the pressure of a busy night had pushed him over the edge. But even as opinions differed, one thing was clear: the incident had struck a chord with everyone present, and its repercussions would soon be felt far beyond the immediate scene. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the restaurant became almost tangible. The soft strains of background music now seemed discordant, and the previously smooth flow of service was replaced by a palpable sense of unease. Marcus, realizing the potential for escalation, discreetly approached Brandon's table. "Good evening, sir," he said in a measured tone. "I couldn't help but notice that tonight hasn't been quite what you expected. Is everything all right?" His words, intended to offer reassurance, carried the weight of someone who understood that beneath the polished exterior of the sterling oak, there were real emotions and human vulnerabilities at play. Brandon offered a restrained smile, his eyes betraying a storm of thoughts. "I'm fine, thank you," he replied, his voice low and even. "But I do hope that this matter can be resolved quickly. I value the quality of service here, and tonight, it seems that standard has been compromised." His measured response, while calm, resonated with a quiet authority that commanded attention. Elsewhere in the dining room, the impact of the earlier altercation continued to ripple outward. A couple seated near the center of the restaurant leaned in close, discussing in hushed tones how such a lapse in service was uncharacteristic of a place as renowned as the Sterling Oak. Their conversation soon attracted the interest of neighboring tables, and soon a collective murmur of speculation began to rise among the guests. Was this merely an isolated incident, or did it hint at deeper issues within the establishment? The air was thick with questions, and the answer was not immediately forthcoming. As the evening wore on, the conversation among the patrons and staff alike took on a life of its own. Every gesture, every raised eyebrow, seemed loaded with meaning. Even the background chatter was punctuated by silent assessments of the young waiter's behavior. The escalation of tension was undeniable, and with every passing minute, the likelihood of further conflict grew. It was as if the entire restaurant was holding its breath, waiting for the next act in what had now become a public drama. At the heart of this brewing storm, the stark contrast between what was expected and what was delivered became increasingly evident. The Sterling Oak had long been synonymous with excellence, where every guest was treated with respect and every service interaction was a display of refined professionalism. Yet tonight, that very reputation was under threat, challenged by a moment of unchecked impulsivity that had sparked a chain reaction of uncertainty and dismay. The unfolding events not only exposed the fragility of human temperaments under pressure, but also served as a stark reminder that even the most prestigious establishments were not immune to the imperfections of those who served within them. In the midst of the growing tension, one could not help but wonder how this incident would ultimately shape the remainder of the evening, and perhaps, even the future of the Sterling Oak. The restaurant's impeccable image was now at a crossroads, with every guest, every staff member, and every passing moment contributing to a narrative that was rapidly evolving from a simple service error into something far more significant. The simmering tension in the dining room of the Sterling Oak reached a turning point that few could have anticipated. As the murmur of anxious conversations persisted, Brandon sat quietly at his table, his earlier discomfort now giving way to a steely curiosity. Every glance from nearby diners, every whispered speculation, seemed to underscore that there was more to his presence than met the eye. In that charged moment, as the weight of the earlier incident pressed down on the room, an unforeseen revelation was about to change the dynamics of the evening entirely. In a discreet corner of the restaurant, the manager's assistant, a diligent young man named David, had been reviewing the surveillance footage on his tablet. While scanning the recordings from earlier that evening, David noticed something peculiar about Brandon's demeanor. Unlike the typical hurried and anxious guests who frequented the Sterling Oak, Brandon exuded an unmistakable air of confidence and purpose. His measured movements and the way he surveyed his surroundings suggested that he was intimately familiar with every nuance of the restaurant, a detail that immediately raised questions in David's mind. As David shared his observations with Marcus, the floor manager, a sense of realization began to dawn. Marcus recalled numerous instances when the owner had been present at the restaurant, quietly observing the service and occasionally offering subtle guidance to his staff. A shiver of recognition ran through him as he recalled that Brandon's poise, his impeccable sense of timing, and the way he carried himself were characteristic of someone who was not merely a guest, but someone deeply connected to the establishment. Meanwhile, as the tension mounted in the dining area, a group of longtime patrons began to speculate among themselves. One regular, Mr. Richard Harris, a retired business executive known for his discerning taste, murmured, "I remember a few years back when a man with an air of quiet authority dined here. It turned out he was one of the owners. Could this young man be the same?" His comment sent ripples of surprise through the assembled guests. Soon, quiet discussions and exchanged glances confirmed what many had started to suspect. Brandon Trump was not just another customer, he was the mastermind behind the Sterling Oak. The realization hit the room like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, the narrative shifted from a minor lapse in service to a profound moment of accountability. It became clear that the scathing remarks by Jason, the impetuous waiter, had been directed at someone whose very identity carried immense weight and influence. The air in the restaurant grew thick with astonishment as whispers of the owner circulated among the diners, each one trying to reconcile the earlier humiliation with the man's dignified bearing. At that pivotal moment, Marcus approached Brandon's table once more, this time with a mixture of deference and urgency. "Sir," he said quietly, "I must apologize on behalf of our staff. We had no idea of your true standing here tonight." Brandon's response was measured and firm. Rising gracefully from his seat, he addressed the entire dining room in a calm yet authoritative tone. "Allow me to clarify, yes, I am the owner of the Sterling Oak. My presence here tonight was not an accident, but a personal commitment to ensure that this establishment continues to meet the high standards we pride ourselves on." His announcement sent a wave of murmurs throughout the room. Suddenly, the earlier criticisms and the unthinking judgment of a single employee took on a new, profound meaning. The revelation was not just a twist in the tale, it was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that even in a place as refined as the Sterling Oak, every member of the team was responsible for upholding a legacy of respect and excellence. For Jason, who had prided himself on his adherence to the restaurant's strict standards, this newfound knowledge struck him like a thunderclap. In the span of a few heartbeats, his earlier conviction dissolved into a mixture of shock and regret. His face drained of color, and he felt the weight of his careless words settle heavily on his shoulders. The realization that he had publicly offended the very man whose vision and leadership had built the restaurant was almost too much to bear. As the diners absorbed this transformation of events, the atmosphere in the room shifted from one of indignation to reflective silence. People began to see the incident in a new light, not merely as an isolated act of rudeness, but as a complex interplay of misunderstandings and unintentional mistakes that had, in a moment of reckoning, exposed the human element behind high expectations. The Sterling Oak, once again, found itself at the center of an unfolding drama that was as much about personal growth and accountability as it was about the unyielding pursuit of perfection. In that defining moment, the restaurant's true spirit was revealed, a place where even the most difficult mistakes could lead to enlightenment and where every member of the staff was given an opportunity to learn, adapt, and ultimately become better. The unexpected revelation of Brandon's identity served as both a wake-up call and an invitation to introspection, for staff and patrons alike, to re-examine what it truly meant to honor the principles of respect, dignity, and excellence. In the wake of the startling revelation that Brandon Trump was indeed the owner of the Sterling Oak, a palpable shift swept through the dining room. The charged atmosphere, which had been thick with tension and uncertainty, was now on the brink of an inevitable confrontation. With the weight of his identity fully exposed, Brandon rose from his table with deliberate calm, his steps measured and his gaze unwavering. It was time to address the situation head-on, to transform a moment of public humiliation into an opportunity for growth and redemption. Jason, the young waiter whose earlier remarks had ignited the chain of events, found himself at the epicenter of an emotional maelstrom. His confident facade had crumbled, replaced by an expression of growing anxiety as he realized the gravity of his misstep. As Brandon approached him with purposeful steps, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, every eye fixed on the unfolding confrontation. "Sir," Brandon began in a clear, resonant voice that carried both authority and measured restraint, "your comments earlier were not only unfounded but also deeply disrespectful. I came here expecting a respectful environment, not to be publicly ridiculed for my personal choices." His words were calm yet piercing, a direct challenge to the norms of behavior that the restaurant had long prided itself on. Jason's initial impulse was to defend himself, to claim that he was merely enforcing the restaurant's dress code policy. But as the owner's gaze bore into him, a gaze that seemed to strip away any pretense of entitlement, Jason's voice wavered. I was just following the rules," he stammered, his tone faltering as he struggled to find an excuse that could justify his harsh tone. The earlier arrogance that had marked his approach was now replaced by a dawning awareness of his error. Brandon continued, his voice steady and imbued with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered far more formidable challenges in the business world. "Rules are meant to maintain standards, not to demean those who choose their own style. Every guest deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of personal preference." His words reverberated through the room, each syllable underscored by a conviction born of years of experience and an unwavering commitment to excellence. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Patrons, who had once whispered among themselves in confusion and shock, now listened intently as the owner laid out not just a rebuke but also a lesson in accountability. It was clear that Brandon was not there to cast judgment, but to foster an environment where mistakes could be acknowledged and learned from. Seeing that his position was rapidly collapsing, Jason's defenses crumbled further. "I'm sorry," he finally managed to utter, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble, I just thought I was doing my job correctly." His apology, tentative as it was, marked the beginning of an important process of self-realization. In that moment, he recognized that his actions, driven by a misguided sense of duty, had caused more harm than he had ever intended. Brandon paused, allowing the words to sink in, both for Jason and for everyone present. "An apology is only the first step," he remarked softly, placing a reassuring hand on Jason's shoulder, a gesture that was both personal and public. "What matters now is understanding why this happened and ensuring it does not happen again." His tone was not one of retribution but of mentorship, an invitation for growth rather than a pronouncement of final judgment. Around them, the energy in the restaurant began to change. The incident, which had initially sown discord and dismay, was gradually giving way to an atmosphere of reflective calm. Patrons exchanged looks that mingled empathy with admiration as they witnessed a genuine moment of accountability. The conversation shifted from scandal to learning, a reminder that even in the high-pressure world of fine dining, mistakes can be stepping stones to improvement if met with sincerity and a willingness to change. As the dialogue unfolded, Marcus and other senior staff moved in to support Brandon's call for a higher standard of conduct. In private meetings that followed later that evening, the staff gathered to discuss not only the immediate repercussions of Jason's lapse in judgment, but also the broader implications for the restaurant's service culture. It was a night that underscored the importance of continuous learning in an industry where every interaction could either elevate or diminish the establishment's reputation. By the time the confrontation came to a close, a new understanding had been forged between Brandon and Jason, a mutual acknowledgement of the need for respect, empathy, and a shared commitment to excellence. In that charged moment of personal reckoning, a lesson was learned that would shape not only the future conduct of a single waiter, but also the culture of an entire team dedicated to preserving the legacy of the Sterling Oak. In the days following the dramatic confrontation at the Sterling Oak, the restaurant slowly began to reclaim its composure, yet the echoes of that fateful evening continued to resonate throughout its halls. What had initially appeared as an isolated incident had transformed into a catalyst for widespread introspection among both staff and patrons, sparking a series of changes that promised to shape the establishment's future for the better. Immediately after the incident, Brandon convened a series of meetings with the restaurant's management team and key staff members. In a series of candid discussions held in the private meeting room behind the main dining area, he addressed the shortcomings that had come to light. "We strive for excellence in every aspect of our service," he remarked firmly, "but tonight, we allowed personal biases and unchecked stress to undermine that standard." His words were not harsh or punitive. Rather, they were imbued with a sincere desire to see everyone rise to the occasion and to use the incident as a learning opportunity. Marcus, the veteran floor manager, took charge of organizing a comprehensive review of the service protocols. He introduced new training sessions focused on the importance of respectful communication, emphasizing that enforcing dress codes or other standards must never come at the expense of courtesy and dignity. These sessions, attended by every member of the staff, were designed not only to improve technical skills but also to foster a culture of empathy and mindfulness, a reminder that every interaction was an opportunity to reinforce the values upon which the Sterling Oak was built. For Jason, the young waiter at the center of the controversy, the incident became a turning point in his career. Over the following weeks, he participated in intensive training modules that addressed conflict resolution, stress management, and the nuances of customer service. His supervisors, recognizing his potential despite his earlier misstep, took him under their wing, providing one-on-one mentoring sessions that helped him understand the delicate balance between upholding standards and ensuring that every guest felt valued. Slowly, Jason began to internalize these lessons. His once rigid approach softened as he learned to listen, to empathize, and to see every customer as an individual rather than merely a subject for enforcement. Beyond the immediate staff, the impact of that night rippled throughout the entire restaurant community. Regular patrons and first-time visitors alike found their opinions of the Sterling Oak evolving in the days after the incident. Reviews in local newspapers and online platforms shifted from a focus on the isolated lapse to praise for the owner's open acknowledgement of the error and his commitment to positive change. Many customers expressed admiration for the manner in which Brandon had handled the situation, using it not as a moment to cast blame, but as an opportunity to reinforce the restaurant's founding principles of respect, excellence, and continuous improvement. In the weeks that followed, the Sterling Oak experienced a noticeable transformation. The staff, having been through rigorous training and honest self-reflection, began to work together with renewed unity. Informal discussions among the team revealed that many had been grappling with similar pressures in silence, and the incident had opened up channels for communication that had previously been stifled by a culture of perfectionism. Staff meetings evolved into collaborative sessions where even the smallest suggestions were welcomed, and every member was encouraged to share their thoughts on how to better serve the restaurant's esteemed clientele. Meanwhile, Brandon continued to be an ever-present figure, not from behind a desk or in an aloof manner, but among his people, engaging with them personally, listening to their concerns, and offering guidance with a gentle firmness that belied his considerable success. His leadership style, marked by a blend of assertiveness and compassion, set a powerful example that resonated with everyone. It wasn't long before the energy of the entire establishment shifted, as if the incident had been the crucible through which a stronger, more resilient service culture was forged. On a broader scale, the episode at the Sterling Oak became a talking point in the wider hospitality community in Chicago. Industry forums and local business groups cited the restaurant's response as a case study in effective crisis management and the importance of turning challenges into opportunities for growth. Other upscale restaurants, inspired by the proactive measures taken at the Sterling Oak, began to reassess their own service policies, investing more in staff training and emphasizing the need for empathy and adaptability in high-pressure environments. In the end, what began as a painful moment of public embarrassment evolved into a transformative experience for all involved. The incident underscored a timeless lesson, that true excellence is not defined by an absence of mistakes, but by the willingness to learn from them and to grow stronger in the process. For Brandon, Jason, and the entire team at the Sterling Oak, the night's events served as a poignant reminder that every interaction, no matter how fraught with tension, carries the potential to elevate one's understanding of respect, professionalism, and the human spirit. The legacy of that turbulent evening continues to be felt in every corner of the restaurant. It stands as a testament to the power of accountability and the belief that even in the most refined settings, the journey toward perfection is paved with the willingness to confront one's shortcomings, make amends, and strive for a future where every guest is not only served but truly valued. And in that ongoing pursuit of excellence, the Sterling Oak remains a shining example of how even the most challenging moments can be transformed into opportunities for lasting positive change.